What is going on, everybody? Welcome to yet another episode of The Rose Show. As always, I'm your host, Jay. Who else but me? And today, my guest, a fucking legend, and that's the only way to introduce him, a fucking legend, Tim Jacobus. Tim is the guy who is responsible for the art on the book Goosebumps. And I'm not going to say too much more than that because we actually get into a pretty deep conversation about that. But if you've read one Goosebump, just one, you've seen his artwork. And his artwork is classic. And it's something that had always left an impression on me. So the second I got a chance to jump on an interview with him, I was like, bet, let's do that. So yeah, it was really cool to be able to talk to him. And I think people who are fans of the series are really going to enjoy it because it's something that I didn't think I'd ever be able to do. Because I mean, we all see the art. We all remember the art. It's left an impression on a lot of us, obviously, especially if you were in my age group. But to speak to the person that is behind such imagery, I don't think I ever had thought I was going to have the opportunity to do this. So I'm very excited to present this product here today. But before we get going, a couple of things as always. Make sure you go to my Patreon account at www.patreon.com/theroseshowpod. It is 100% free to subscribe. You get all show announcements early before anyone else. I'm going to be really trying to do some cool stuff over there. First opportunity at merch. I'm going to post it over there whenever the new designs come in. And much love to everybody who has bought a shirt and has been rocking it and showing their support of the show. I appreciate that. Anyway. So yeah, you get first shot at all that. And like I said, we're going to be doing some more things here. 2025, I'm really going to be focusing on building the Patreon account and getting some cool stuff out to the people who follow. Yeah, so really looking forward to putting that together in the new year, which is super close. I keep saying this, but I have no idea where the hell 2024 went. And the fact that 2025 is right around the corner is crazy. But anyway, it's either here or there. So make sure you go and join www.patreon.com/theroseshowpod. 100% free to join. And also, don't forget, wherever you are watching this or listening to this on, whatever platform that might be, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, whatever, to like and subscribe, because that supports the show in more ways than you could imagine. It might be something real minuscule to you, but it means the world to me. So much love and appreciation. But anyway, I'm going to shut up. Here is a word from my sponsors, and then we're getting straight into the interview with my friend, Tim Jacobus. Here we go, y'all. Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Jay, and I'm here to tell you about my sponsor, W Energy. Now, what is W Energy? Well, I'm going to tell you because I myself use W Energy. Here I've got this Calio cream. It's got a great flavor to it, and not only that, it is clean energy. Energy that's not going to make you crash, not give you the jitters. I've been looking for a reason to drop all my old energy drinks that were unhealthy for me. Too much additives, too much trash in it, too much stuff that's going to make you crash, make you fall asleep at the end of the day. Not W. So how can you get your hands on some W to try? I'm going to tell you how. And I'm going to tell you how to save some money while you do it. Go to www.w.gg and at checkout, type in my new promo code, and it is Who Else. That's right. The promo code at www.w.gg is Who Else. Because, hey, who else but me, your boy Jay? I wouldn't steer you wrong, right? And when you do, make sure you tag your boy. Let me know you got some, you tried it, and I know you're going to love it. All right, everybody, it's time to stop and let you know about today's sponsor of the show, Crazy Martin's in Piqua, Ohio, one of my favorite places in the entire world to go to. Crazy Martin's has provided their customers with quality products for over 20 years, from ashtrays to water pipes and everything in between. Stop in, check out their selection, and of course, check out their pinball machines. With over 20 pins to choose from, there is something for everyone. Crazy since 1996. I don't just say this about every place. I love going to Crazy Martin's. I've always loved going to Crazy Martin's ever since I was of age to go to Crazy Martin's. It's one of my favorite places in the entire world. Me and my wife go there almost every Sunday to play pinball machines. It is one of the funnest spots in Ohio you could possibly find. It is in Piqua, Ohio. Check out their website at www.crazymartins.com. What is going on, everybody? Welcome to yet another episode of The Rose Show. As always, I'm your host, Jay. Who else but me? And today I'm going to start the intro off a little bit differently. I'm going to tell a short story here. So I am a child of the 90s, which anybody who's watched this show knows. I grew up in the 90s, and I went to a elementary school in Troy, Ohio called Haywood Elementary. Now, the reason why I bring this up is because back then there was no internet. And I know that's hard for some people to fathom, but internet was not accessible. So one of the only things that we had growing up when, obviously we weren't watching TV was reading books. I know, fascinating thought, right? But in my elementary school, me and my core group of friends, we would always rush on library day. I think it was one day out of the week. We all got to go to the library and pick out books. And we would all rush to, obviously, the children's section. But we would honestly fight over the Goosebumps books. Now, the reason why that's important, and I'm sure I'm not the only person in that time frame that would do so, but I never was able to read books. Even to this day, it's very hard to get me to sit down and really comprehend and pay attention to a book. Because it doesn't grab my attention. I find myself reading 3 or 4 pages at a time, and by the time I get to the 4th page, I'm like, I have no idea what I just read. And it's still a problem, like I said, to this day. But back then, one of the things that would captivate me to enough to pay attention to a book would be the cover. Now that leads me to today's guest, because one of the reasons why I would go to the Goosebumps books is because I would be obsessed with some of these cover pages and the artwork that come along to them. Say cheese and die. Always, even to this day, I can still see that picture. The Mask cover that everybody knows. The Night of the Living Dummy. All these different pieces of artwork would draw me to this book. So when I had the opportunity to talk to this guy, I pressed book immediately because I'm like, this is obviously somebody that, even though I might not know the ins and outs of this person, he was a big impact on my life. And I wanted him here today so I could get to know his backstory. It is Tim Jacobus, who was the illustrator for these Goosebumps books, and he is my guest today.
That's a heck of an introduction there. I like that.
I try my best on all these intros, man. That's kind of my thing, is I try my best to give the introduction I would want. So, and it's the introduction you deserve. Because again, I think that, and I'm sure you know from talking to people, those books back then were a big piece of everybody's life. And I will obviously get to that here in a little bit. But for a lot of the people in my, I guess you would call it, quote unquote, scene, that was our first exposure to any kind of, I guess you would call it, horror almost, even though it was drawn towards kids. So it was and not only that, being that small and seeing some of that stuff, man, it freaks you out. So yeah, it was a big part of that time frame for me. But I would like to start with you and kind of get your background and kind of find out, the history and how you got into art.
I'm a New Jersey guy, and I grew up. I'm a little older than you, obviously. I was a child of the '70s, so we were kind of a post World War II. My dad was in World War II, and part of the GI Bill was to get out. And they got extra money and easy to get a house in one of those newly constructed neighborhoods. So when I was growing up, there was a ton of kids in just a 4-block radius who were exactly the same age as I was. So there was no shortage of friends and people to do stuff with. Great place to grow up. And but the association with art as a living, it didn't exist. My father, grew up during the Depression. The fact that he had a good steady job and he could, put a roof over our head, that was the most important thing to him. And he wanted us all to have a college education, and that he didn't have one. So that was his prime function, that we went to college. So when I got to be a senior in high school, and maybe I was a little more diverging from this path, and I told him I wanted to go to art school, that didn't fly well. So even though my dad was a creative guy and he could draw, the idea of art for a living. That didn't resonate with him. He was you
Sure.
go work for a company and you get your pension, and again, I'm not knocking any of that stuff, and it served him very well, and
Yeah.
he had a very comfortable retirement. The idea that his son was going to go into the art business and try to make a living creating paintings was just that was out of his realm of comprehension.
Yeah. Different world back then, and that's something completely. I hear conversations about that. Like back in those days, that was completely normal. And it seemed like almost the opposite of what it is today. Like now you try to become an artist of some sort, whether it be a musician or a podcaster or whatever it is. That's your retirement plan. Whereas before, your retirement plan was your job. So yeah, completely different time. That makes a lot of sense.
And I,
So
I also,
go
just to
ahead.
touch on it real quick, I also think that what's available today that wasn't available to my dad is the access to information about this stuff. So
Yeah,
the idea that, there was an art career, if you lived in the vicinity of New York City, but it wasn't
right.
readily, that information just wasn't there. We didn't have somebody in our family that was in the art business. So, listen, if my dad was, alive and well today and he was starting a new family, he would look into it and maybe have a completely different attitude.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, case in point, technology and they have the access to this, we wouldn't be sitting here talking right now if it wasn't for that. So, it's a completely different world. Yeah.
Yeah, and we've seen it, it's changed twice in my lifetime. And now we're getting ready, there's going to be a third change. And I used to think, my dad was born in 1926, and I used to think, man, what a crazy life. He was born before television and air conditioning and refrigeration, and and then he passed away just a couple of years ago, so he saw all of this. And I'm starting to think, well, that's going to be nothing what you and I get to experience if we're lucky enough to live a nice long life.
Yeah, absolutely. I even think about that. I'm 38 years old. So even in my 30 years, especially in the last 25, like we went from 30 channels and a color TV. Having a color TV was a big deal. And now if you don't have 3 or 4 flat screens in your house, you're kind of poor. So
So
it's
true.
yeah,
Yeah, it's the I think it's a great perspective to have, and you're of that age where knowing the world prior to the internet and social
yeah,
media and just that whole revolution, because it really was a completely different way to exist.
yeah,
And the idea that you didn't have a phone in your pocket, and when you were a kid and you went out, you were out, and
yeah.
there was no way for anybody to get a hold of you, and you're on your own. You got to figure out your own life, and you get yourself in a jam, you got to get yourself out of that jam.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, to that point, when you were a small kid, were you always kind of artistic, or when you made the decision to go to art school, was that when you became an art, or how did that process start for you?
My dad could draw, and but he didn't talk about it as an artistic thing. He used it as a communication device, meaning
Mm,
you're sitting at the dinner table and he goes, I'm thinking about building a deck on the back of the house. And he would grab his napkin and flip it over. And I think it's going to look something like this. And he could draw very well right off the top of his head. So I, growing up in a house like that, I assume that's what everybody does. And I see him do it. So I start doing it. And again, it's just a way of communicating. I was my best friend who lived next door growing up also liked to draw. And coincidentally enough, we ended up going to the same high school. Then we went to the same art school, and we went into the business together. But as kids, along with ride your bike, go swimming, play baseball, sitting down on the floor and grabbing a bunch of paper and drawing, that was well within the realm of these are just normal things we do.
Sure.
The idea of drawing was always there, but it really wasn't until I was in high school when I finally was exposed to commercial art and not just, when you're in high school, what they're teaching you is fine art. This is oil painting. This is, it's more about medium and the different ways of doing stuff. But I was always going, yeah, this stuff's fun, but I don't know how people make a living at it. And just due to the structure of my schedule as a senior in high school, I needed to fill up some time in my schedule. I went to my guidance counselor. He said, yeah, they're starting a commercial art class over at the vocational school. It'll fill up your time slots." And I went, "Heck yeah, art class instead of algebra 4? Yeah, we're not doing that. Let's go let's jump into this." And when I got there, that was the oh my God, this is really what I want to do.
So you made the distinction a couple of minutes ago about the difference between just regular art and commercial art. So kind of want to talk about that a little bit because that's intriguing to me. Is it as specific as far as like toning back your creativity, or is it more of finding a target audience, or what would be the for the layman? What would be the difference between regular art and commercial art?
So okay, so you're doing fine art so I'm back at my regular high school, and you go to the art class there, and the teacher will give you assignment, and he'll go, okay, this assignment is you could do, we're going to do a forest scene, but you have to use charcoal pencils and a little bit of pastel. Okay, let's break that out, and you do that. When you go over to the commercial art place, then it's like, okay, what we're going to start out here with is you're going to do a pen and ink drawing. But then once you finish the drawing, then we're going to get this ready to go into production. And what steps do you have to take to make this camera ready so that it could be printed? And this is what the printing process is from the time you finish your art to what you need to do to get it prepped. And then this is the printing process. So these are things to watch out for. If your pen and ink is too tight, these areas will fill in. If you're doing your art, say for the newspaper, you have to be very careful because the quality of the paper and all these things that I never thought of. And these are all action items that you need to know. And so, yeah, the whole thing was, and also getting your mind ready for, okay, when you walk out the door, you're not going to go into the city and just start doing book covers. You need to take
Sure.
some other steps along the way. You can go work at a newspaper and, helps, like that was kind of the baseline is you would go there and do what was called paste up, which is literally taking words on in little blocks and pasting them into the format of the newspaper. So when they ran the newspaper that day, maybe you did the want ads or you put together the flyer about the local supermarket. But then if you were lucky enough, you didn't go to the newspaper, you got into a magazine. Now they're dealing with higher quality materials. The paper's better. They can print in color. So now you can add more variety to what you're doing, and the deadlines aren't that newspaper thing. That's every day. Hurry up, get that done. We're not fooling around. Done is better than perfect. So as you move up the ladder, your ability to do a more high quality thing was presented in front of you. So again, it was that this is the business of art rather than,
Sure.
yeah, you know how to draw. That's part of it, but that's not all of it.
Yeah. Um, I come from a background of music. I've done a lot of stuff with touring and all that kind of stuff. And you said something that kind of struck a chord with me there. You said done is better than perfect. And as an artist, and I think any artist, whether it be an artist that draws, an artist that's a musician, that if you take your craft seriously, that statement right there is profound because I think a lot of us, it's typically the opposite for artists. We want perfect because perfect is done. Do you find yourself in your world anyway? Do you find yourself struggling with that sometimes? Because again, when you care about your craft, when you care about your art form, perfect and done is one and the same. Was that hard for you to kind of adjust to?
Yes. Well, that's so okay. Then once I got out of that vocational school, then I went to a regular art school. And
Mm,
I didn't go to college. I went to art school. There's a difference. This was kind of a trade school. And what we did was you did, what you got was a certificate that stated you sat at a desk and you did art for 35 hours a week for this many weeks over this many years. So again, it's not a college credential, but we're just doing art all the time. And then they would set it up as if it was a real job. So not only are you creating the art, you've got deadlines, and if you miss the deadline, in this case, you would get a bad grade. In real life, you're not getting paid. So
right.
that impetus of you've got to get this done on time was put into your psyche very early on, and you it's it's one of those things that, so now I'm going to go advance a little, and I'm out of art school, and I'm getting, I'm real early in the book business and doing stuff. You're still a rookie at what you do. You're still making mistakes. There's things you have to do twice and three times that are time killers. So
Yeah.
uh, I always knew, again, it's got to get done. And if it doesn't get done, you're not going to get that second job. And in my head, it was always, you're never going to call the art director up and say, I need more time. That's just not an option. So you learn to put in more time, stay up overnight again. And if you stay on top of what you're doing, those are rare occasions. Usually if you have to do an all-nighter, it's because you wasted some time earlier in the process, and it's really your own fault. So I uh, I maintained a reputation of getting my work done on time, and that my art
Nice.
was of a consistent level.
Yeah.
If it, there's that to your point, there can be that point where it's like, yeah, it's done. Here you go, and they look at it and they go, well, that's not even nearly as good as the thing you turned in last
Sure.
month, and you need to have that consistency level. Sure, there's always one more thing you wish you had time
Yes.
to do on the piece, and I always try, when I was doing book covers, I always tried to make sure that all the important pieces are in the painting. And then when you're in that last phase, you're in the fourth quarter of the development, you're just fine tuning everything that's there. So if for some reason the power goes out and this thing's got to go in, it's all to a level of complete that's will be acceptable. So, but then if you're lucky enough and you get to do it as long as I've been doing it, you don't make those mistakes that you have to do 3 and 4 times over. You've already made them 42 times over the years, and you get smart after a while and you don't make those mistakes. So there's a little more of that luxury of, oh, okay, listen, we still have a day and a half to go on this deadline. I'm in pretty good shape here. Now I can really just enjoy myself and really just tighten this thing up nice and get it exactly the way I want it. So when I turn it in, this is one of those pieces where I go, yeah, yeah, this is it. This is what I want.
Awesome. Okay. All right. Fair enough. So, how did you end up linking up with R.L. Stein after you got done with your vocational school and all that stuff?
So I jumped into the book business. It took so I kind of was that guy that I told you I wasn't going to be. So when I got out of art school, I didn't want to take that path that everybody else took.
Mhm.
Go to work for the magazine, then become the art director, and then be able to do a couple illustrations, then build up your illustrations and jump into the book business. I just went out the door and said, I'm skipping all those steps. I'm just going to go and see what happens on the streets and see if I can roust up some books. And uh, ignorance is sometimes it's a good thing. If I knew the things that I was going to run into, I might have chickened out. So the idea that there was nobody in my family in the business, my dad didn't know anything about it. There's nobody warning me that my plan is a little ill-conceived. And
Sure.
so you jump in, and it took 3 years from the time I got out of art school till I landed my first paperback cover. And that's kind of a key thing, because getting your first job is kind of everything. Because if you get one, you can go down the street and go, hey, you know, Donald down the street at Dog Books gave me this job and I got it done. So see, I'm responsible. And then they go, oh, well, if he took a chance on you, I could take a chance on you. So 3 years to get that first one, but they don't just, it's not like a switch goes on and you get your first book and then things start happening. It's a very slow, methodical process. So if I did 2 books the first year, then again, you're not getting paid lots and lots of money for these covers. So you're going to go maintain another job at home to pay your bills. And then the next year I got a couple of more, and then you do start to build up a little momentum. Once you get established and you're kind of doing it on your own, the next step is to find yourself a rep or an agent. And his job, he's got the connections that you're never, like you may get those connections, but it'll take you 12 years to make the
Sure.
contacts that this guy, this is his thing. So all of a sudden, all those hours and days that I was spending walking around New York City with a case full of paintings, knocking on doors, like everything was physical. You
Right.
carried your art, you knocked on doors, you picked up a thing that was attached to the wall to call people, and so now I have the ability to stay home. He's getting the jobs for me, and I'm spending my time creating the art instead of spending half or 3/4 of my efforts trying to find those jobs. So I had worked with Scholastic on a few books, and maybe I had worked with them for 3 years or so, maybe a little bit more than that, and never did any horror. Had no horror work in my portfolio. My work was, it's a little sci-fi fantasy. It was weird, but the idea that I had a horror background, that wasn't there.
Sure.
And I had done some kid stuff. So when Goosebumps came along, I had just finished up, a cover, and I was kind of standing in the, like, on deck, with the people I work with, going, okay, yeah, I'm free if there's anything coming up. And they said, yeah, there's this thing called Goosebumps. It's with the author R.L. Stine, and R.L.'s been around for a number of years, and this is 1990. So I start hearing about this in late 91. And they're going, yeah, there's a series coming up, and R.L. Stine is working on it. Now, I don't know who R.L. Stine is when they tell me, again, I have no way to look it up and find out who he is. So I just go, okay, that's cool. If you guys think he's somebody, then he's somebody. I'm good with that. And they're going, yeah, this series, we're not too excited about it. We don't think this is going anywhere. we're going to kind of ask you a favor here, if you could work with us on the budget, because we really don't think, you know, we may sell one or two of these things, but listen, just help us out on this. We're going to cut your budget a little, and then when this is over, we'll put you on something else. And we'll put you on something good, was the exact phrase. And if you'll help us out. And I looked at it and said, "Oh, this is pretty interesting. I've never done any horror, and this looks like fun. So heck yeah, I'm in." It wasn't like they cut the pay in half. They just knocked some money off the top. And back then, and I still kind of have that attitude that take the job that's in front of you. Don't wait and hope for the better one. This one's right here. Just take it, get it done, and move on. So I went into it with no horror experience, low expectations, and they didn't even pick me right away. So I did book number 1, Welcome to Dead House, and another illustrator named Jim Thiessen did book number 2, Stay Out of the Basement. And Jim Thiessen was an established horror guy, so they didn't know if they were going to go with my style or if he was the better way to go on it. And they said, "Listen, we're going to go all the way through." Usually they make a decision before you actually go to print, but they're going, again, we're not too thrilled or excited about this series. You do one, he does one, we'll roll it through. When we get done, we'll kind of look at them and see how they do and decide who's going to do. I think at the time it was either only going to be a total of 4 books or maybe it was 6 books. So again, it wasn't like, oh, there's this huge competition between me and this guy, Jim. I knew him, and this was just another gig. And so the main element that they kept harping on was, we don't want this to be too scary. And Jim's stuff was a little more edgy than mine. If any of the people listening, want to look up Jim Thiessen, you'll see some pretty outrageous, some wild, he did adult horror. And the guy was amazing. Absolutely amazing. There's a piece he did of a guy turning into a werewolf. That's mind blowing. Anyway, they decided to go with my style because my artwork's a little less realistic than his, and I was using that real rich color palette, which they went, using all these colors really, that takes the edge off of it. It's it's not just dark, grays, blacks, and brooding. It's I got a carnival of colors going on in there. So those 2 elements that, okay, yeah, Tim, you could do the remaining couple of books that are in the series. So all right, cool, I'm in. That's this should be fun. And the series didn't take off right away. There was actually some talk of, maybe we're not going to keep this thing going. And I think when we got to, book 6, book 7, they were going, it's not really doing anything. It's not doing bad, but it's not doing good. And somewhere around book 9, book 10, all of a sudden it went from being this semi-flat line thing to it just took off. And I'm sure there's tons of theories out there of what that was or why that was. But then once it took off, then everybody was like, oh, we got something here. And so what was cool is back when nobody cared, everybody left me alone. And it was just me and one art director, and we kind of were just doing whatever we wanted, and everybody was fine with that. When it took off, what usually happens in any creative endeavor is once something looks good, exactly.
Mhm.
They come out of the woodwork where, oh, well, then you need my input here and
Yeah.
you need my input. Now, all of a sudden, I have 8 art directors helping me out on the project. And I give all the credit to who was ever in charge of everything. They said, don't anybody touch this. This is working perfectly the way it is. I don't want to change a thing. So we still continue to do exactly what we did at the beginning. And for the next 10 years, they just let us continue to do what we wanted. And of course, it's what everybody wants, but the freedom of coming up with concepts and ideas was still me and one other person. And it wasn't, we didn't have a whole bunch of new friends.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so interesting. So much of what you just said right there, just I had so many thoughts that were running through my head. First and foremost, um, when I was going through the research, trying to really do a dive into some of the stuff that you've done before in the past, um, you brought up the fact you've done science fiction before. It threw me through a loop seeing that you did a book or a video game cover for Star Trek First Contact. Now, I am a Trekkie, always been a Trekkie ever since the time frame we're talking about right now. So when I saw Star Trek First Contact, I thought it was talking about the movie, and I'm like, wait a minute, what the fuck? There was a video game of the movie, and I immediately start searching for this thing. Come to find out, it was a PC game. But that's neither here or there. Just a funny story there. But I did look up.
Yeah, it was a PC game, and if I remember right, it was still on floppy. It wasn't even,
Yeah,
the thing was, it was on the forefront. Like they had to kind of explain what this even was, because it was a little,
yeah,
it had pages in it like a book, and I did the cover and I did some little spot graphics on the inside, but they're going, no, this is a game. And I'm going, and then back then the graphics were next to nothing. It was really more of
yeah,
it's a text-based thing. And it's like, all right, well, okay.
yeah.
But it was a thrill for me because I was the right age where I remember Star Trek, coming on, and that was must watch TV.
Yeah.
I'm over my buddy's house next door, and yeah, if Star Trek's coming on that night, we are all in.
Yeah. Yeah, that was something I interviewed. I'm not sure how familiar you are with modern Star Trek in the last 30 years, but I interviewed Tim Russ last year, who played
Oh, very
Tuvok
cool.
and
Yeah.
yeah, Voyager. And he said the same thing. Like even when he was growing up, you watch Star Trek. Why? Because remember, 3 channels. That's all you had back then. So you watch Star Trek because it was one of the only things that they showed at the time. So it's cool to hear some of the history, even little small details like that. And I did look up what the game entailed because again, you said it was floppy disk, and I remember having a floppy disk reader at my mom's house long time ago. So I remember what those graphics were, and it seemed like primarily this game, Star Trek First Contact, it was pretty much text based. Like you had options at the bottom. There would be a story up top, and it would tell you this is the scenario. And then you had like 3 options at the bottom, and you just picked an option, and boom, the next set of text came up. So, kids, that was video games back then.
Yeah, and really, it was one of those choose your own adventure books, except it was
Yes, that's exactly what it was. Absolutely, absolutely. Oh, that's awesome. Anyway, I didn't know I was going to get on a Star Trek tangent, so I apologize. And I know we're
yeah,
running
well,
out of
that one
time here, so
doesn't
we
come
keep
up
going.
that often. Yeah, that's a good
Yes,
one. That was a fun piece of art. It was cool because it was a wraparound book cover, and if it wasn't the first time I did a wraparound, it was one of the few that I had done. And what's fun and challenging with a wraparound book cover is the form follows function. So yeah, you've got your live area on the front cover where the main elements go, but you got to know how big the text is going to be. Then where does the spine of the book line up, and can you do something cool on the spine so when the book is in the shelf, there should be some little element of an illustration that gets somebody's attention. then the back cover, you need more open space because there's going to be text and, UPC symbols and all that stuff. So, yeah, it's a little more of a, mathematical problem than your standard cover.
Yeah, sure, that's fair. So, yeah, like I said, if it's anything Star Trek, I'm immediately that you want to hook me at all, bro. Star Trek, boop. That's one of the things. So when you guys were you guys being you and Mr. Stein, when you guys were in the process in that 10-year run and making these books, at any point, whether it been when the TV show was released or, just feedback from people that, you talked to, did you know how much of a cultural impact you guys were making when this thing really took off? With first and foremost, it's hilarious that they thought, oh, we're not really excited about this project. And to see how big it became at that time is crazy. It was Goosebumps was modern culture, like just as much as any other pop culture there is today. Goosebumps was that important, and it's if you weren't around back then, you don't really know what I mean, but it absolutely was. Did you guys know you were making that kind of an impact when it really took off?
So I think RL knew before I did, because he was closer to the front lines. His wife was also a publisher herself, so like he was in the deeper end of the swimming pool.
Sure.
I'm just some kid out in New Jersey. I'm getting feedback from the people at Scholastic going, "Hey, this is going great. Keep doing what you're doing. We're very happy." As a matter of fact, yeah, I know we were undercutting you on those first few covers. Here's a couple of more dollars, and the idea that this was going to just continue was mind blowing to me. The fact that, a normal series would be 4 books, that would be a lot. Sometimes 3 was the max that you're going to get out of any other author. And the idea that, we're already, we're at book 10 and they're going, yeah, there's no end in sight. We're just going to keep on doing. That was a godsend. As an illustrator, you're always, you're only employed until you finish that, sign your painting, and then you're unemployed again. And if there isn't something right there stacked up, you just, you panic a little bit, the bills are going to continue to come. And so it's that hand to mouth thing. And the idea that, nope, there's going to be another one, at least I knew there, the lights aren't getting turned off here. We're doing okay. So, I was probably way late to the scenario, and I remember it vividly. Went to a friend's house. At the time, I didn't have any kids, and it was me and my ex-wife, and it was a group of families over someone's house for dinner, and they all had kids of Goosebumps age, the downstairs playing in the basement. And this was a guy I had worked with years ago. And, I had actually left working with him to start my, go officially into the art career full time. So, we're over, we're eating dinner, dinner's rolling along. Other people are there. And I don't know these people well, but, we're all having a good time. And my friend Jerry says, "So are you working on, anything interesting? Or, that anybody might have heard of?" And he's like, "Nah, I've got a nice steady series. It's something you probably never heard of it before. It's called Goosebumps." And it was like, I dropped an F-bomb in church. Like everybody just stopped and stared at me. And he's going, "Are you kidding me?" And I'm going, "You heard of it?" And he just opens the door to the basement. He goes, "Kids, come up here and bring your books with you." And this group of kids comes out of the basement, all 8 of them, and they don't have one, but they got multiples in their hand. And I was like, oh, holy smokes. Oh, that's cool. So, yeah, I learned about it on the, more of a grassroots level than, I wasn't getting reports from the publisher saying, "Look at these numbers." They could have told me the numbers and they wouldn't have meant a thing to me.
Sure.
But Yeah, it was that, and I went, oh, this is cool.
Yeah, man, what a kick in the teeth that would have been, man, just to have all them people carrying your artwork, bro. That's awesome. That's a really cool story. Well, as we kind of wind down here, one thing I did want to ask you, because I started off this interview talking about some of the pieces that mattered to me the most to stick out in my head. Definitely, I think more than the rest of them, Say Cheese and Die. For some reason, I don't know if that was the first one I saw or that was the one that just made the most impact on me or what. But that's the cover that I remember more than any other ones. And then there are some other ones, like I said, Night of the Living Dummy, all that stuff that comes later. But is there anything that sticks out in your head when you think about all the book covers that you did? Are there any specific ones where you're like, man, this is my favorite, or this is my favorites? Any specific, well, let's say two, three or four, any specific covers that come to your mind?
I'll start. I'm going to start with Say Cheese and Die, just because you brought it up. So,
Awesome.
um, RL is writing the book at the same time I'm doing the cover. So I don't have a book that I'm allowed to read. I just get a title and a couple of sentences of what the book's about. I do my thing, he does his thing. And we're not in communication on regular basis. He's working with editors, I'm working with art directors, and the art directors and editors are talking. So it's not like it's this collaborative thing where we're on the phone and discussing minute details. I'm just doing my own thing. So when Say Cheese and Dice comes along, I realize on that one, oh, there's like, that's a joke. The title, Say Cheese and Die, is a joke. And there's humor here. So, trying to have a little more fun. We want to scare you, but having fun is part of it as well. So the humor and the horror go together. And I was like, okay, I get it. Now, oh, that makes way more sense. So, to do the ludicrous family of skeletons at a barbecue, that's funny. It's scary too, but it's got a humor aspect to it. So that was one that made me go, I think I get it. I think I understand what we're supposed to be doing here. Now, for ones that, the ones that I like the most are always the ones where, if there's a human in any of the pictures, I'm always going to get a little reference material. I can draw people from my imagination, but they come out way more cartoon-like. So back then it was a Polaroid camera and, take a quick shot. And then, you'd get subtle lighting, detail, things that I just couldn't conjure out of my head. Now I got some reference, so I could bring that person to more of a level of being realistic. And then when I throw some wild stuff behind them, you as the kid viewer goes, oh, well, that looks like a very real person. And they're in this wild, crazy, imaginative world. So it was the juxtaposition of both of them that, worked well. But whenever possible, I would use friends and family and, on the covers. So at the time it's fun because, it's like, all right, get your niece, to show up and you take a picture of her. And, then when the book comes out, you get to give it to her and she can tell her friends, and that's all fun. But now it's even better because here we are, 20, 30 years, 30 plus years later. And, they're no longer the 12-year-old kid. They're adults with their own families. And, we can still joke about, hey, do you remember, doing the art and getting you on the cover there? So it's my niece on The Haunted Mask. That's my niece.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's my niece, Jessie. And Jessie is now a doctor. And Dr. Jessie has 4 kids of her own. And, yeah, she doesn't shy away though from telling her patients that is her on the on that Goosebumps cover.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I just a little fun story here that I've never said on the show. I've told some people before, but when I first started doing this podcast, which at this point I'll be about, I think this will probably be about episode 40, mid 40, something like that. I've been doing it since January of 2024. And one of the first people, I've always kind of had the attitude like you got to be fearless. You know, you get to answer no 100% of the time if you don't ask a question. So I decided I'm going to hit up R.L. Stein on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to send him a DM. I'm going to see if he'll interview me. It's probably going to be a no, but it'll be one of the coolest no's I've ever gotten in my life. And I did. Sure enough, about a week later, he hits me back. He says, "Sorry, Jay, I just don't have the time right now. Maybe some other time," or something to that effect. And I'm sitting here looking at it like I just got a rejection from R.L. Stein. That's still pretty fucking cool. Yeah.
That's all right.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. So, but
he's a busy man, and
yeah,
what's nice is that was from him. It wasn't from somebody else, and
that's awesome.
and what's wild about him is his what he picks and chooses to do is wildly erratic. It's what I feel like doing. So it's not like,
Sure.
yeah, you don't have, it's not that you only had done 40 podcasts. That had nothing to do with it. He really was
Right.
busy at that moment. You could have done 6 podcasts, and if it was the right time, he would have said, yeah, let's do it. Let's do it tomorrow. So
Yeah, sure. But yeah, just having that rejection meant just as much as actually doing it, because of how important, even more than the stories for me, because I'm a very visual person. You can see everything behind me right now. I've got a lot of different pieces, a lot of different things. I like memories, visual memories, because again, I don't read well. I've never been able to read well. So the visual aspects of the book, and I'm not just saying this because you're here, the visual aspects of the book meant more to me than the book itself. So I brought up the fact that I sent that message to RL to tell you, you honestly probably had more of an impact on me when it came to those books than he did. Granted, it was his vision, his writings, but you made it come alive. Because again, it's the 90s. Grant, when the TV show came along, it was different. But back then, it was all theater of the mind. And when you first looked at that cover, that set up the rest of whatever you did with that book from that on, whether you read a page or from front to back. That cover set up the entire theater of the mind from then on out. So your artwork, to me, meant more probably than the actual book did. So from that aspect, I do at least want to say thank you. And I always give the last couple of minutes to my guest. If there's anything you want to plug, social media, anything you got that where people can find your events, the floor is yours, my man.
Well, first off, thank you. That's super, super nice to say. It's very humbling. But what's more interesting to me is that, here we are all these years later, and you and I are still having a conversation about
Yes.
something that from back then, because there was plenty of things that I did in the 90s and probably you did in the 90s that we don't look back at as being all that cool anymore. And the fact that this still has a shine on it is so wonderful. It's not lost on me. I appreciate you and everybody else who still appreciates the art. Now, on the flip side of it, you also couldn't escape it. We were pumping that stuff into your schools through the Scholastic
Yes.
Book Fair. It was on TV. It was in the supermarkets. It was at the drugstore. They were in flea markets. Like, they were everywhere. So
Yes.
part of it was the sheer volume of the stuff. But, I appreciate the kind words from just the self-promotion part of it. Best place to see and hear about what I'm doing is on Instagram, and that's just Tim Jacobus on Instagram. Jacobus Studios is where you can get prints of the Goosebumps covers, and the part that's nice about that is $10 from every print that we sell goes to buying food for the local food bank. So you guys can get yourself a piece of Goosebumps art, plus know that you're doing something good to help some people who actually need it.
Yeah, sure, that's very admirable. And yeah, you're right. There are a lot of things in the 90s that I don't look back fondly on, but this is one of them. Tim, thank you so much for your time, my man. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Jay. Really appreciate it.